So today we're going to examine epic sex, what it is, what's actually blocking it, and a solution that is not conventional that we really feel is super effective so that everybody can start having epic sex.
I would even say the definition that we're going to bring to what epic sex is definitely not the conventional one.
Absolutely. And just so you know, there might be a few little trigger warnings in this conversation, especially maybe in the explicit, where we may share some stories that are edgy. And so I just want you to be prepared for that and make sure you self-soothe and breathe or pause if something's like a lot to hear in the moment. And then come back to the episode, because oftentimes people get a little bit triggered. They sit with it, they self-regulate, they come back, they actually have breakthroughs. So that's what I'm hoping for.
We are
today.
Speaking about transformation.
Exactly. The use of sex to actually have a positive, lasting transformation in our life.
Well, in general, then, this is what I would literally describe epic sex as. No matter where it is that you've had either no experience, some experience, a vast numbers of experience, if sex is bringing you into a healthier state, physically, psychologically, emotionally, even spiritually, then this is what epic sex is. So in that sense, it is something that transforms you into a more robust, capable, and even you could say optimized individual, as well as like interrelational person.
And I think there's elements of epic sex where it's like, wow, I haven't experienced that sensation before, or maybe there's a new type of orgasmic sensation that arises. You're like, what was that? That was epic.
Well, and if you really then pay attention to that, you will often notice that the physical and the psychological, or the body and the psyche, are not separate. And this is then gets into the whole, we don't need to go into this right now, but that the mind is embodied, meaning that the body is a sensory organism that actually helps the mind to understand the world, be able to have cognition, that it's not just, you're not just a brain that's happening.
Yes.
So when you have the physical experience that is new and amazing, it often can create shifts then on the psychological level as well.
Well, let's look at quickly what is a typical definition of epic sex, just so we know that what we're dealing with today.
Well, I believe this, on a metaphorical level, the idea of epic sex for a lot is that it's this kind of like a drug, or this like getting drunk
Or
on
high.
sex, or high
Yeah.
on it. And with that, there's also kind of this understanding that maybe you even have like a hangover from it. On other levels, you could even see where, let's say like in a lot of like maybe like pop culture music, or like kind of like rap or something, they will talk a lot about like, oh, it was so good it beat you up, or that it like, you know, it destroyed me, or I couldn't walk for weeks, and that is this exaggerated idea that sex is so good that it actually almost like does damage to the body.
Or the chemically induced type of epic sex, where you take psychedelics, for example, and you think like, this is the best sex of my life. But actually, if you take the psychedelics away, it really wasn't that extraordinary.
And then typically the day after, you have the downside of it. So this is where then we would differentiate around like, well, epic sex is actually makes you feel hungrier for it, in a sense that, not that like, oh, I'm now addicted to it, but that, wow, I want more of that. The next day your body feels amazing. Now, when you have these huge experiences, it would be normal sometimes that you will want to even fall asleep or integrate that experience.
Yeah.
But when you wake up, as opposed to being sore or not being able to walk or like function as well out in society, if you've given that integration time, and all of a sudden now you're showing up stronger in your relationship, you can feel that you actually still have that desire for your partner, and your body, your hips are moving better, everything is flowing in a great way. Well, this then is a sign that you've just had epic sex.
Woo, I like it. I want some of that. Well, who is it for? I think this is a really important question, because if we were to answer that through, say, the mainstream look at what epic sex is and who it's for, you'd think, okay, you have to be a Hollywood superstar or a rap
Yes.
Singer, or someone who's young and sexy and an influencer on Instagram or something like that. But I have to say that a lot of my female clients that are like the supermodel looking ones that are, popular and just gorgeous, they come to me because they can't feel anything. They're not actually enjoying sex, or they've had a lot of violations, which makes it that sex is a commodity, something transactional for them, but it's not something they actually really get to enjoy for themselves.
Well, I love that you bring this up about models. I have been in relationships with models. I've had models be clients, and typically, because they're so used to being looked at from the outside, they haven't actually spent as much time feeling from the inside. Not to mention then if there is anything to do with like weird diets or lack of food, etc., that then they literally aren't feeling as much on the inside. Also too, there's typically a lot of like physical training that's going into it as well. So this isn't even just your kind of typical runway models. Now this could be like your fitness models. But these people that you're seeing who literally are kind of like considered the epitome of
sexiness.
Like sexiness, they a lot of times are putting off that image, but aren't actually necessarily feeling that from the inside. They do not have the interoceptive awareness, and there can be a lot of like numbness or even tension and pain, either due to the training, the psychology of the industry, or as well the lifestyle.
Well, funnily, a book came out a few years ago called Magnificent Sex, which is in the same department, I think, of what we're regarding as epic sex. And they looked at a lot of people, a broad age range, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, like a big age range. And they looked at all kinds of lifestyles. They had disabled people, they had all different classes and colors and shapes and sizes and lifestyles. And one of the main things that they came away from was, well, first of all, I want to talk about how talk therapy is not effective in helping people have epic sex. So that's one thing. And that's one thing they did notice is actually sex therapists were ruining people's sex lives. Which
interesting conclusion.
Which for me is an obvious one because I've been in the industry so long, but it's not that obvious when it's not your job, it's not your industry, and you're really needing help. Where do your doctor send you? Is to a sex therapist.
Well, what happens is that if you have a talk therapist that actually doesn't have a sense of embodiment and an ability to really like ask into and feel into your specific psychodynamics as well as the biomechanics that go into whatever sexual acts that you're partaking in, then a lot of the advice becomes very prescriptive, which is typically, well, talk about what it is that you want. Well, but if you can't feel your body, then you haven't really discovered it, and it's based off of what you think it is that you want as opposed to what you feel that your body needs, not just in general, but even just into that moment.
The desire fads. Whatever is popular, the trend. I mean, you had mentioned in another episode that we did on prostate massage, this trend of pegging from a couple years ago. And so there are these trends. There was a trend for a while. Everyone had to be like female ejaculation. Like that was the big thing. So we're taught by the trends what we should desire and want in a sexual experience.
And a trend that's been going on for quite some time is, well, depending where you're going for your advice, it ranges anything from, well, try psychedelic, or an older one is probably have a glass of wine, or more recently, vibrators and lube and sex toys. And then also, by a more recent one then, is go to a tantra party, which is kind of borderline with go ahead and bring a third person and do polyamory as a way to
or kink,
outsource really a solution for often what is an in-house problem. And by in-house problem, what I mean is that if a couple can start to develop a level of proprioceptive awareness, like where they are in the space regarding their genitals, as well as all of their body when engaging in a sensual or sexual activity, the interoceptive awareness of either the other person's internal body, but also their own internal body, then they're going to start to really feel much more of what's happening, which is going to allow them to attune to each other. And so as opposed to then actually getting disassociated from their body, which is why a lot of times, and I think this is the reason why those statistics were showing that people who were going to the talk therapists were not actually succeeding, was because it was literally killing their erotic intelligence. And this is something that you speak about. Maybe you can talk about what that is, because it's a piece, I think, that's so crucial to really going, okay, wait, there's something that I can actually trust in myself and feel my way towards that will lead towards a good experience.
I think a simple way, it is a factor in what makes epic sex, at least in my mind, is, are you experiencing pleasure, orgasm from a state of relaxed arousal or sympathetic arousal? And the thing that disappoints a lot of people is you have the initial, say, tickle or turn on, and you need to rapidly do something about it. So you vigorously try and get rid of the arousal because it's disturbing you. And then you have this maybe nice, maybe not so nice little moment. And that's all done through the sympathetic system. So there's no relaxation. It's just arousal, 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 like a vibrator really vibrating a clitoris until you explode, that kind of thing. Or really, really fast, hard, penetrative sex, these types of things. And then you're left with, often people are like, but why do I feel depleted after that? And
or not even wanting to be with my partner.
Yeah,
or
just wanting to turn away or like have separation. So relaxed arousal, I think, is a lot of what we're going to be talking about as well in this episode. How do you attain that? What are the steps to getting that? If you can just lean in, however, to, oh, what do you mean by that? In the sense of, can I feel turned on, but also give myself permission to relax, take some deeper breaths, start to notice actual sensation in my body versus being hyper focused on just the genitals.
Well, you will see that there is, in these what I would call peak experiences, which is where I feel a lot of talk therapy, or even the idea in the bigger culture of what an epic sex is that it's a peak experience that then has this strong drop off after. And in terms of the neurochemistry, you have increased levels of dopamine, adrenaline, oxytocin, everything going up, and then boom, you have this peak experience, and then all of that drops, and then what does rise is prolactin, which is literally this feeling of like, okay, I'm done, I'm sexually satisfied, I don't need to then now engage with my partner. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with a peak orgasmic experience, but that is something that if you continually just have those, you will notice that it starts to feel this feeling of depletion as opposed to actually starting to intensify over time and allowing for that possibility for literally to expand and boost one's pleasure capacity on the whole.
Well, I want to answer my own question. Who is it for? Epic sex is for you. It's literally for every human being. We are designed for it. But if we don't have developed the correct skill sets, we are kind of going almost to the side of it. And we might have little hints of it here and there, but we're not quite on it. And the modern lifestyle is only conducive to that intense arousal, like what's going on? I need to finish this project. I need to go here. I need to do this. And there's almost a tunnel vision in these walking heads that don't know they have bodies as a symptom of modern living. And it's not actually how we live day in and day out could be setting us up for epic sex, but a lot of times it's not. So it is for everyone. However, as a society at large, we do need to learn how to reclaim a little bit of our attention, how to understand like, oh, I can down-regulate to a state where my body is now ready for sensations other than fear and stress. And then also start to enhance the nervous system, because the nervous system really is amazing. You can start optimizing in ways that you can't even dream of by starting to acutely pay attention, for example, to sensation.
It's similar to saying, well, who is good physical fitness, proper diet for? Well, it's for everybody.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if all you are used to is eating fast food, foods that are high in sugar, or just drinking a lot of caffeine, then
Your idea of exercise is walking from the microwave to the couch.
but you're getting these kind of big spikes that can feel great, but then there's that big drop off after. So if that helps you understand sort of the metaphor between these two, we don't typically think of sex as something that actually is part of one's lifestyle for an overall better life. In the same way that if you go back 50, 100 years, the idea of having maybe a good diet or that physical fitness and exercise is something that's actually for everybody and not just for,
The
athletes. Yes,
yeah,
precisely.
Exactly. So saying all that, I want to get back to, in this part of the podcast, what are some of the major things that get in the way? So I mentioned a few already, like stress and fear and lifestyle. But what are the things? Let's name those pieces, because some are psycho-emotional, some are somatic. And what's the solution?
Okay, well, we wanted to talk about also what are like the positives of it, though.
Of course, yeah.
What are understanding that there is an emotional range of what is the potential of magnificent sex. So some of the things that you will notice, and especially you talked at the very, very, very beginning about the embodiment being that the mind is embodied, that there is actually not this separation that we typically think of, or at least there's this very strong association between, for instance, pain and anger. So that could be, for instance, one of the blockers. Now, I want to go through a list of them, but at the same time, these are the blockers. We also have
What's on the other side?
On the other side. And so as a way to motivate you all, let's talk about
Well, it's extraordinary if you really think about it. This is one of the things I love so much about my work, is yes, there are contracted experiences and they do not feel nice. But when a person can learn to unwind that and expand their physical form, their mind, their emotions, there is an entire landscape of incredible possibility. And it's all just one choice away. So that's why this episode is exciting to me.
And in a lifestyle, then you realize that this is a lifelong journey. So as opposed to thinking, well, magnificent sex is this one thing that needs to happen in this way, is that it becomes epic because it has caused you to grow. So what might have been an epic experience for the very first time that you had sex, it might, if you were then to have it 20 years later, might not be epic relative to where you are, because it's no longer causing like this expansion
Absolutely.
inside of you. However, though, I would never say, oh, okay, well, no, objectively then this is the epic one and that one isn't. Because when you fall into that trap, then you will see sometimes with couples where they are like, oh yeah, that one person that I was with, it was dependent on them, or I had that one experience early in our relationship and then that never can really be recreated because the first time is always the best.
Well, it's true that we cannot recreate, but we can create. And that's why this episode's important to me, is that if we can identify what's in the way, and we can give you the skills to work through that. It's not about ignoring it. It's not about spiritually bypassing or making niceties. It's like feel your way through the block. Then you have access to incredible resources where in each new moment you can literally create something extraordinary.
So the positive factors that I would say are on both a psychological as well as a physical level would be a sense of joy and pleasure.
Yay.
That's just a very basic one, but massive. Like feeling that people will report when they're having an epic sexual experience.
People experience joy every day right now. It's a super important thing. Joy is essential to your mental health, to your well-being, and actually even just optimizing your physical health, because people who are unhappy and stressed all the time, it's really, really hard on our physicality.
Then the other one, which is something that maybe people wouldn't necessarily think of, but can you actually get a sense of calm and relaxation from a sexual experience?
Another massively important one in modern life, because right now we're, especially after the whole, lockdowns and everything, people haven't fully recovered their nervous system. So one of the most crucial things to not only have extraordinary sexual experiences, but also have really great family life, great community life, great work life, is just to experience what is it actually like to feel at ease in your own body with your own mind. That state is so crucial, and if you can get it from either self-pleasuring or partnered sex, that's a medicine, and it's a very important medicine.
The other one is, and when I say calm and relaxation, I mean calm from an emotional state, but then also actually if you were to measure your biomarkers, you would see that heart rate goes down, literally like everything in your system down regulates and relaxes.
Yes.
So then all of a sudden now sex has another purpose, because you could be feeling stressed and you can have sex that's like, okay, I'm back in my body.
Rejuvenating.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Now the other one is you could almost say a sense of pride, but it's almost like you have a sovereignty, which is something that you speak about, as well as, or in other words, is like a sense of feeling closeness to another person, or even to yourself, a feeling of being whole, and then the physical side of that is like an attraction towards oneself.
So like a magnetism.
Yes, a magnetism to one's partner, to oneself, to that experience. Being
Well,
drawn
I think
towards.
that's then another incredible gift. Having a energetic charge where you have energy, where you're lit up, where life is like there's some awe, there's wonderment. This is another very vital felt state to help a community and a society to thrive. So if we can experience those felt states directly, again, through sex, how lovely is that? Because it's an easily accessible tool.
You literally, like a delicious meal, you are drawn towards that meal, and you're in a state that it's maybe even drawn towards you as well.
Yeah, amazing.
Now, the other one is a sense of novelty, a sense of newness.
Ooh.
And that is on a physical sensation of like, whoa, I've never experienced that before. And on the emotional side, or psychological side as well, this sense of exploration, of curiosity, of adventure.
Well, that's also super important because by remaining curious, and I like to use the word erotically innocent, so this is innocence where in no sense, it doesn't have to make sense, there's no good, bad, right, wrong, but you're just curious about sensation. This touch here, maybe you've had it 1,000 times, but when you actually pay attention, you're having it for the first time because it's that day, and the elements of that day is unique and interesting. So the beauty of that is then you can access novelty, especially within a long-term committed connection, because that's what people believe they can't have.
Yes.
And it actually is just not true.
Well, a lot of times all of those positives we've mentioned are like separate. It's like, okay, I can have the calmness and relaxation with a person that I've known for a long time in the committed relationship. But then that doesn't mean I can have a novel experience with them anymore. I have to go off and have the crazy experience that then, however, also causes fear and anxiety. And so then it's like, oh no, these things are separate boxes. But when you really start to look at creating magnificent sex or epic sex as a part of your lifestyle, then you will notice that there's actually an enrichment that happens over time. And there's a book, The Alchemy of Love. What was the author's name for that?
Teresa Crenshaw.
And I really loved this book by Teresa Crenshaw because she was speaking about how we have this idea that the age range of like the 20s is when all the best sex happens. And she was actually saying, well, if we look just at the biology, and she was speaking about heterosexual couples, that women have high levels of estrogen, men have high levels of testosterone, then sure, it might create like kind of a quick charge, but the bodies really don't match up well. Whereas if people have really taken the time to care for themselves, couples in 50s or 60s, or even maybe not couples, just people who come together in that age range, start to meet each other much more, because the men have lower levels of testosterone. They're more open to the connection and intimacy there. And women whose estrogen levels have lowered then have relatively more high levels of testosterone. And they also just want then the physicality of it. And so there's a better match there, which completely flies in the face of, you know, what we hold to be culturally true.
Yes. But at any stage of life, we that's why we created the Embodied Love University, actually, is because we want to be on this journey with you through all your stages of life, and that there is an arc of learning and growing. And what we're proposing with this episode right now is that you don't just want to mature and grow and become masterful with the sexual part. There's a simultaneous pillar that's just needed. They balance each other, and that's the emotional maturity component. Yes. And when you can grow both simultaneously, you are just a person that becomes a better and better and better partner and lover and someone more interesting than a person who only grows sexually but has the maturity level of a teenager. Now you have manipulators and people who play games with other people's hearts, and they might be super magnetic, but they're really immature and like they cause a lot of problems. Or you could super develop your heart and then have like very little development sexually, and that becomes also a problem, because then you resort to only one thing, and it's only that thing, and it's done a one particular way.
We have a tendency to sort of romanticize another person, idealize them, and physically maybe something isn't that good, but you will be imagining that it's great, and then until it isn't, then you need to get to the next kind of emotional, physical, and serial monogamous, where it's like you're really more in love with being in love than you are with the person that's there. And actually, the physical experience, when you could have all of it. Now, the piece that you mentioned about emotional maturity, I think, is really important, because if epic sex is defined as something that causes growth, you will likely then need to deal with, well, what are the blockers that typically come into the stopping us from all the things that we listed with joy, pleasure, calmness, relaxation, sovereignty, and the ability of feeling attraction, as well as then the novelty and curiosity. Now, those blockers are the flip side. So the thing that stops us from the having joy and pleasure is anger and pain. The piece that is holding us back from calmness and relaxation is fear and anxiety. The part that's holding us back from having this sense of sovereignty and attraction is actually shame, blame, and a feeling of disgust. And then the part that's holding us back from having novelty and curiosity is actually the emotional component of boredom and then numbness.
Well, we'll get more into that, because I'd like to unpack that in the explicit side. And
we're going to go into the how of it, but people need to be able to identify that these things, when they come up, that there's a possibility to actually be able to transform them, and that there are solutions for that. And on kind of a generic level, it's this importance of having emotional maturity, because you need to be able to own, okay, this isn't just the other person, this is something that maybe they're creating, but it's also something that maybe I have inside myself. How do I actually, one, just become aware of that? I think the first step is, can you step into an experience, have that, and then be able to say, okay, I need to be able to step back from it, regulate yourself, and then revisit it again.
Well, that would be, I think, the start of maturity is simply self-awareness, which we'll discuss in the second half. And then the next step of maturity after some self-awareness, because if you're just not self-aware, you can't do any of this stuff, would then be, how much of this can I tolerate, and before I need to actually go and just be by myself and process this stuff. And often journaling will be I journaled so much in my 20s. Like, honestly, I think I saved myself from a lot of difficult things by just working stuff out, intentionally facing the thing.
That's being able to sit with it in yourself.
And own it.
Yes, precisely.
Own the fact that I am insecure and I need external acknowledgement of whatever in order just to feel slightly confident. If I can own that now, okay, so when I dress sexy to get attention, I know why I'm doing it because I feel insecure and I want to be, approved of. But then at least now I'm coming into that consciously, and then over time I don't even need to do that anymore because I just feel confident.
Well, and then you're able to do the next piece, which is once you can sit with yourself, then you're able to actually be able to engage with another person. And as opposed to having to bow out of the conversation right away, you're able to stay in that conversation and then start to communicate your needs, hear the other person's needs, and be able to then start to create some possibility for transformation once you've created that in relation with yourself, but then also in relation with another person.
Awesome.
Now, you had originally brought this episode to me because you wanted to hear a little bit about something called de-armoring.
Yes. So I just, in the public side, I only just want to name it. In the explicit side, which is I'm just trying to encourage you all to jump into the explicit stuff, I actually want us to kind of break down what useful ways,
how to use it,
how we can use this, because just conceptually, I don't like just conceptual things. They're not that useful. But we do hear this term de-armoring out there. I actually prefer your term for it, which is resensitizing, because it feels more accurate. But tell us a little bit, just what is de-armoring? Where does it kind of come from? And why is de-armoring something worthy of considering if we want to have epic sex?
Well, we should understand sort of where the term comes from. Now, the term de-armoring, or actually it was talked about as character armor, was from Wilhelm Reich's book, Character Analysis, I believe 1932. And he was a biologist, but also then went into psychotherapy and studied under Freud. And he was noticing that people that had different types of, he was looking at people that had neuroses, would hold certain postures or feel a lot of pain when touched in different places that didn't really make sense just from a physiological perspective. And he was noticing that, and here's the theory part of it, is that if a person has a traumatic event or something that's chronically been happening for a long period of time, which is chronic, that's what that means, is that you will literally be bracing against some form of pain, which are any of those blockers we mentioned. And so you will hold a certain posture. One way is you could look at this as, for instance, a teenage girl starts to grow breasts. She starts getting attention that she doesn't like. And so she starts to hunch herself over, kind of covering the fact that she has breasts. And then this also then kind of goes into people, for instance, who have depression, typically are more down, holding their shoulders down, as opposed to someone who is shoulders open, feeling good. So by then understanding what he talked about as character armor, is that this now, though it was important at that time period, that something maybe was happening that you wanted to avoid and maybe even needed to, later on in life, the body still holds that posture when it's no longer serving, and then it impedes them from functioning in other areas of life to the point that it can create neuroses. And that's
a challenge in life can create an armor, and then de-armoring is facing that part in your own psychophysiology.
Well, a lot of times people will think of de-armoring as using touch to physically correct the posture. So it is a psychosomatic practice in that you are affecting the soma, the body, to have a psychological release. But it isn't just actually touch. It could be just a correcting of the posture, but it also is even having conversations on certain things, where a
Opening
person
up to
gets
possibilities. Yeah.
where the person is no longer disassociating or shutting down, allows for that shift. So when we speak about it or when I mention it as resensitization, I'm typically talking about it from the physical experience. So for somebody who, let's say they have, even to themselves, they have entered their own body too quickly, too fast, and they do this repeatedly, typically then at the entrance of, whether it's the anus or their vagina, tension will start to build up and be held there. And then, as opposed to shying away from it, you can start to use certain breath techniques, certain touch techniques, certain awareness techniques to bring awareness to it and get it to start to open up. And sometimes it's even just listening to this part of the body when it's a no and respecting it, that then it creates this shift that happens. So, and that could be felt like, I now, when I have sex, because I've been penetrated too soon, too fast, then it starts to feel painful, or I get the emotion of anger. So then the de-armoring process would be, how do you shift then that pain and anger to release the tension so that you can then have joy and pleasure there. So that would be one example of the resensitizing part, where it's from pain to pleasure.
Yeah.
I will also talk about de-armoring, however, as like a psychological reorientation, because
But I think you're resensitizing psychologically too. You're allowing people to, first of all, like, associate with whatever the negative emotion is. It's not the end of the world. So you're like reframing whatever it is that they're feeling. They're allowed to feel that, and then you're allowing their system to resensitize and be available to the expanded expression of
there
that.
is not a separation on it. Sometimes
Correct.
I'll use the word reorientation strictly because you will have a person who says, I just do not like penetration. I only do it for my partner. And that's how they're oriented around penetration.
Yeah.
Because it's like, every time I have sex, it creates fear and anxiety in me. And all of a sudden they're like, wait, sex actually calms me down. I feel relaxed. I feel closer to my partner. I feel happy from it. Now all of a sudden, their psychological orientation around penetration shifts. So that's why I'll sometimes use those two different words, depending on, where the client is at.
Well, I'm
and
excited
they want to shift.
to get into this. I just wanted to say one last thing in our the public part of the podcast is the same person, William Reich. My piece that I took from him, you speak a lot of the de-armoring aspect. The piece that I took when I was reading his work was, oh wow, what he considered to impede libido being free-flowing life energy in all cells and systems. What he saw was, if there was any kind of blocks on the psyche, the level of, your thoughts, your feelings,
Yes.
all of that, then the libido would be impeded. And when you were able to bloom, like you face the fear, or you face the anger or whatever, and you unwind it, suddenly you're filled with a lot more life force, a lot more libido. And I actually saw that to be true in my work. So I thought, this is a really cool way of describing libido.
Well, and it gives, again, the motivation for why do proper nutrition, why do fitness, why actually approach magnificent sex in this way. It's because we are literally bringing out more life source, more potential in one's body.
Yes. Well, if you are interested in exploring more, Embodied Love University, we have so many resources, and we do have stuff around these pieces as well. So if you want to look around, play a little bit, join that.
Well, definitely check out Awaken the Sensual Woman if you are a woman that you are feeling that you're dealing with these blocks, because there is literally a 6-week protocol that you can go through where you're going to unlock all of these things. For guys, the program YAFAP is going to be one that is also going to give you the ability to deal with a lot of more of the erectile dysfunctions, but also things like shame, fear of loss of energy, porn addiction, etc., and things that a lot of guys come to us for being held back. But in general, check out Embodied Love University, and if you're wanting to hear how to deal with all these things, you're also going to want to go into the membership section of this podcast, which we're going to jump into right now.
Well, let's get into it. To join us for the complete and explicit version of this podcast, just simply upgrade your membership and you'll get instant access.